So, you know that blinking cursor on a completely blank white screen?
Oh, yeah. It is, it's universally terrifying.
It really is. And I mean, it honestly doesn't matter if you're an accountant staring down a quarterly report or like a college student facing a term paper.
Right. Or a professional novelist trying to begin chapter one.
Exactly. That little pulsing line just sits there. It pulses, it judges you. I mean, it basically demands that you pull something brilliant out of the absolute void.
Yeah, and biologically speaking, it represents this incredibly unnatural demand on the human brain.
Wait, really? Unnatural how?
Well, think about it. We are highly reactive creatures,
Yeah.
right? We evolved to respond to stimuli, like a predator in the brush or a sudden change in the weather.
Or just, someone asking you a direct question.
Exactly. But the blank screen offers zero stimulus. It's just a vacuum.
Yeah, it gives you nothing to work with.
Right. And the psychological weight of that vacuum completely triggers our innate perfectionism. We feel this overwhelming pressure to ensure that, the very first words we type are flawless.
Like they have to be permanent and profound right out of the gate.
Yes. But the woman we are doing a deep dive on today has stared down that exact blinking cursor and defeated it, like, over 170 times.
Which is just staggering to even think about. So, for you listening, today we are pulling our source material from the April 2026 compilation of the Write Well newsletter.
Which you can find over at angelahunt.substack.com.
Right. And we are really getting into the mind of its author, Angela Hunt, who is an absolute powerhouse.
I mean, it's genuinely difficult to overstate the sheer volume of that output. 170 published books.
And we're talking a huge variety, too. Fiction, nonfiction, thrillers, children's books.
Yeah, and to sustain that kind of prolific output across decades, I mean, she isn't just sitting around waiting for the muse to strike.
No, she'd never get anything done.
Right. She has systematically hacked the psychology of storytelling and productivity.
I mean, just doing the math, if you wrote a book a year, that is 170 years of continuous labor.
It's wild.
So, today's deep dive is fundamentally a masterclass in reverse engineering that exact kind of endurance.
Because we are going to look at the actual neurological mechanics of how ideas are generated and, how we accidentally kill them.
We're also going to examine her deeply counterintuitive rules of narrative architecture, which are fascinating.
And then finally, we'll look at the brutal psychology of getting someone to actually care about the thing you created, the pitching and packaging.
Yeah, and I think the crucial thing to understand here is that while Hunt is writing this advice for aspiring authors, the underlying mechanisms apply to literally all human communication.
Absolutely. Whether you're trying to craft a compelling email to your board of directors or you're pitching a new product.
Or just trying to figure out why a certain movie made you cry.
Yeah. She provides the architectural blueprints for how human beings process empathy and tension and meaning.
So let's just start at the very beginning of the creative life cycle, right? Before you can worry about character arcs or pitching to a boss, you got to get something on that blank page.
You need the initial spark.
Right. And the way Hunt frames idea generation, it completely upends how we usually think about inspiration. She introduces this fascinating case study of a guy named Riley Walls.
Oh, the sticky note guy.
Yes. So Walls is famous in certain internet circles because he essentially wallpapered his entire apartment in sticky notes.
Like every single surface was covered in his scribbled thoughts.
Yeah. And the instinctive reaction when you hear a story like that is to assume, oh, he was documenting brilliant multi-million-dollar business models.
Or these complex philosophical treatises.
Exactly. But the reality is far more mundane and honestly far more important. The notes contain good ideas, sure, but they also contain terrible ideas.
Just completely trivial observations.
Yeah, half-baked thoughts that made absolutely no logical sense.
And see, I think most of us would look at a wall of bad ideas and feel a deep sense of embarrassment.
Oh, for sure. We have this internal filter that screams, don't write that down, it's stupid.
Right. Someone might see it, or worse, you might see it tomorrow and judge yourself.
But Hunt is highlighting a very specific neurological reality here, isn't she?
She really is. And this might be the single most liberating concept for anyone who is stuck on a project right now.
Okay, lay it out for us.
So, the brain's idea-generating mechanism is entirely generic.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning you do not possess a highly refined genius idea lobe that operates independently from, like, a terrible idea lobe.
Oh, I see. It's all the same factory.
Exactly. It's a single unified muscle. So when your brain produces a thought and your immediate knee-jerk reaction is to mentally flag it as silly or derivative.
You're basically punishing the muscle.
Yes, you are doing serious long-term damage to that mechanism.
You're training your brain to stay quiet.
Precisely. Because the brain is an efficiency machine. If it consistently gets negative feedback for supplying ideas, it will simply cease production.
Just to protect you from the psychological discomfort of your own judgment.
Right. The mechanism shuts down entirely. So the fear of producing a bad idea guarantees that you will produce no ideas at all.
You know, it makes me think of this old cabin I used to visit. The plumbing was just terrible.
Oh, no.
Yeah, if you hadn't been there in a few months, you would turn on the bathroom faucet, and out would come this sludge. Just thick, brown, rusty water.
Gross.
Completely gross. And if you didn't know any better, you'd look at that water and think, well, the well is poisoned, the whole cabin is ruined.
But you don't panic, right?
Right. You don't panic, you just let the faucet run. You have to let the rusty water flow through the pipes to push all the sediment out.
I love that analogy.
Because only after the bad water is expelled does the clear, pure water actually start to run.
And that is exactly the mechanism Hunt is describing here. Writing down the terrible, trivial ideas on those sticky notes, that is the act of leaving the faucet running.
You're validating the brain's output. You're telling it, thank you, keep them coming.
Exactly. But there is a secondary, equally vital reason for capturing the rusty water. A trivial idea, sitting in isolation, is totally useless. But when you place it next to a different, seemingly unrelated trivial idea, a chemical reaction can occur.
Oh, the jigsaw puzzle of inspiration.
Right. And the source material provides this stunning example of this with Andy Weir.
Yes. For anyone unfamiliar, Andy Weir wrote The Martian, which became, that massive Matt Damon movie.
And he also wrote Project Hail Mary, which is this intricately plotted, deeply scientific masterpiece of modern sci-fi.
It is so good. But when you read Project Hail Mary, the plot feels so perfectly intertwined that you just assume Weir must have experienced a singular stroke of genius, right?
Yeah, you assume he just mapped the entire universe out on a whiteboard over one manic weekend.
Right. You assume the idea arrived whole, but Weir has explicitly stated that was not the case at all.
Not even close. He had a collection of completely isolated, disparate sticky notes that he gathered over several years.
Okay, what were the notes?
So one note was just a vague concept. An astronaut wakes up on a ship with total amnesia.
Which, that's a trope. It's not a novel. It's barely a short story.
It's rusty water.
Completely rusty water.
Then on another day, he wrote down a note about a theoretical spacecraft fuel, a mass conversion energy source that could, theoretically power near light speed travel.
Again, cool science fact, but it has zero narrative drive.
Exactly. A third sticky note was a psychological premise. What would happen if one ordinary person was suddenly granted absolute dictatorial authority to solve an existential global crisis?
A fun political thought experiment, sure.
And a fourth note was simply his desire to write a first contact story featuring an alien life form.
So none of these are connected yet?
No. Notice how not a single one of those ideas can sustain a 300-page narrative on its own.
The amnesiac astronaut has literally nowhere to go.
The fuel is just a textbook entry. But then Weir started moving his sticky notes around.
Okay, this is where it gets good.
Right. He asked, what if the theoretical fuel is the existential crisis threatening Earth?
Oh.
And what if the person given absolute authority is the one who discovers the fuel?
Okay, things are linking up.
What if that person ends up being the amnesiac astronaut who wakes up light years from home?
Yes.
And what if, when he wakes up, he finds an alien ship facing the exact same fuel crisis?
The moment you combine them, the friction between those concepts creates a blazing fire. It builds an entire universe.
But, and this is the key point, if Weir had judged that first idea, if he'd said, amnesiac astronaut, that's been done a million times, throw it away.
Then the subsequent connections would have been physically impossible.
Exactly. This completely removes the pressure of having that mythical aha moment. Your only job today isn't to write a masterpiece.
Your job is just to capture one weird thought about rocket fuel and, put it in a drawer.
That's it. And keep the faucet running. But there's a dark side to this process that we have to talk about.
Let's hear it.
Even if you are diligently collecting your notes, the creative process is incredibly vulnerable to external poisoning.
Ah, the envy trap.
The comparison game. It is the absolute fastest way to derail a project and lose your unique voice.
It's so funny. I do that exact thing with this deep dive sometimes. I'll listen to a hyper-produced, incredibly serious, somber, investigative journalism show.
Oh, I know where this is going.
Yeah, and I will suddenly feel this burning inadequacy. I'll think, I need to sound more serious. I need to lower my register and use way bigger words.
And how does that usually work out?
Terrible. The next time I record, I sound like a robot reading a dictionary. I try to fix a perceived weakness by copying someone else's strength, and I just end up diluting the only thing I actually bring to the table.
Which is such a common trap.
Yeah.
And Hunt illustrates that exact phenomenon with this brilliant anecdote about Seth Rogen.
Seth Rogen, really?
Yeah. So Rogen is obviously a very specific kind of writer and performer, right? He excels at character-driven, highly conversational, often absurdity-laced comedy.
Definitely.
But Hunt recounts a time when Rogen was watching a Michael Bay film. You know, high stakes, massive explosions, incredible visual spectacle, soaring tension.
Which is the absolute opposite of a Seth Rogen movie.
Entirely. But Rogen watches this, and he falls right into the envy trap. He starts measuring his own comedic scripts against the sheer adrenaline of Michael Bay's action sequences.
Oh, no. He feels inadequate.
He does. So what does he do? He goes back to his current comedy script and starts frantically rewriting it, trying to shoehorn in these massive Michael Bay-style action set pieces.
He literally tries to become someone else.
Yes. And he hands these revised pages to his longtime writing partner, Evan Goldberg.
Okay, what did Goldberg say?
Well, Goldberg takes one look at this tonal disaster, this strange hybrid of stoner comedy and military-grade explosions, and says, what Michael Bay would think of this is what we think when Michael Bay tries to be funny.
Oh my goodness, that is a devastatingly accurate critique.
Right, because Michael Bay attempting to write a nuanced, improvised dialogue scene would be a disaster.
And Seth Rogen trying to direct a collapsing skyscraper is equally misguided.
Exactly. When you mold your unique voice to mimic someone else's success, you just abandon your innate advantages.
So the only metric of success that actually fosters growth is comparing your output today to your output yesterday.
100%.
Which honestly brings us to a piece of advice from Hunt that felt like a physical weight lifting off my chest. It is rule number 10 of her process.
Oh, this is a great one.
And it is simply this: finish badly.
It feels illegal to even say out loud, doesn't it?
It really does. Every academic institution we have ever attended has drilled the exact opposite into our heads.
We are taught to draft meticulously, outline heavily, and produce polished work.
But she states it with absolute authority. Perfectionism kills more novels than incompetence.
Let's really pull that apart.
Yeah.
Because she is saying that a lack of vocabulary or structural knowledge or even a lack of innate talent, that is not what leaves hard drives filled with half-finished manuscripts.
No, it is the impossible standard of the first draft.
Exactly. Think about the psychology of taste for a second. If you are attempting to write a book, it is highly likely because you read a lot of books.
Right. You're a fan of the medium.
Yes. So you have developed highly refined taste. You know what a beautiful sentence sounds like. You know how a perfectly paced thriller makes your heart race.
But then when you sit down to write your first draft, your output does not match your taste at all.
Not even close. Your dialogue is clunky. Your pacing is glacial.
It's the rusty water again.
It is. And because your output falls so painfully short of your taste, you despair. You assume you lack the talent, and you just stop typing.
But Hunt explains the logic behind finishing badly with this single, undeniable truth. You cannot revise a blank page.
It is physically impossible.
Right. The singular purpose of a first draft is not quality, it is momentum. It is the act of shoveling sand into a sandbox so that months later you actually have material to sculpt into a castle.
She literally says, allow your first drafts to be awkward, uneven, and inconsistent. Press forward.
And this pragmatism, this total rejection of the romanticized ideal of the tortured artist, it extends directly into her daily routine.
Oh, her routine is fascinating. Because whenever you hear about someone who has written 170 books, the immediate assumption is that they have access to some esoteric, magical ritual, you know?
Yeah, we want to believe they light a specific incense, face true north, and channel the spirits of dead poets before they type a single word.
We want a secret code to explain their superhuman output.
But Hunt's actual routine is almost comically mundane. I mean, she wakes up, she feeds her animals, she eats breakfast.
She drinks caffeine. She heavily emphasizes the caffeine.
Yes, the caffeine is key. Then she does her household chores, and then without any fanfare at all, she just sits down in her chair and works.
The magic is not in the mood. The magic is in the commitment to sit down.
By stripping away all the mysticism, she basically turns writing into a blue-collar trade.
Like a bricklayer. A bricklayer doesn't wait to feel inspired by the concept of masonry before laying bricks.
No, they show up to the site, they mix the mortar, and they lay the line. Even if the line is slightly crooked that day, the wall still gets taller.
And Hunt approaches the blank page with that exact same industrial discipline.
Okay, so we've left the faucet running, we've gathered our disparate sticky notes, we've avoided comparing ourselves to Michael Bay.
Hopefully.
Right, and we've aggressively laid down a terrible, awkward, deeply flawed first draft. We have sand in the sandbox.
Now, the real work begins. We have to shape it.
And this transitions us into Hunt's list of crazy fiction writing rules that work. And they are called crazy because they advocate for severe counterintuitive constraints.
Which is important because human beings generally avoid constraints. We associate absolute freedom with creativity.
We think if I can do anything, I can create a masterpiece.
But total freedom is actually paralyzing. Constraints force the brain to find lateral solutions. They breed ingenuity.
And the most vital constraint Hunt introduces involves the core of the narrative, the protagonist. Let's examine Rule 3. Make your protagonist wrong.
This is a tough one for a lot of people.
It is. When I first read this, I balked. If I'm going to spend 300 pages with a character, I want to like them. I want to root for them.
Sure.
If I make them wrong, aren't I just making them unlikable? Like, think about Captain America. He's not wrong. He's the moral center of the universe.
Well, it is crucial here to distinguish between a character being morally corrupt and a character operating under a false belief.
Okay, unpack that.
Making a protagonist wrong does not mean making them a villain. It means giving them a flawed interpretation of how the world works.
A sincere belief that feels entirely justified to them, but is actually incomplete or actively harmful to their own goals.
Exactly. Let's
Yeah.
ground this. Think about Tony Stark in the first Iron Man movie.
Great example.
He isn't a villain, but his foundational belief at the start of the movie is deeply wrong. He believes that unchecked technological proliferation, specifically his weapons, is the only way to ensure global security.
He believes he can privatize world peace without personal consequence.
Perfect way to put it. He is brilliant, charismatic, and entirely wrong.
Right, because if he started the movie understanding the human cost of his weapons and possessing a deep sense of self-sacrificing responsibility, there is no movie.
Exactly. A protagonist who is perfectly right about everything from page 1 cannot grow. They can only be vindicated.
They just wander through the plot, waiting for the rest of the world to realize how smart they are.
And that is a static, lifeless narrative. Growth requires initial blindness.
The plot's entire function is to dismantle that false belief. And this ties inextricably into Hunt's Rule 15. Give your character what he wants, not what he needs.
Or, more accurately, give them what they think they want in a way that brutally exposes what they actually need.
It is a ruthless psychological tactic because if a character desires massive financial success and you simply give them a promotion and a pile of money, the story terminates.
Happiness is the death of narrative tension.
Right.
The dissonance between desire and fulfillment is the engine of character growth. Let's look at Walter White in Breaking Bad.
Oh, classic want versus need.
His stated desire, his want, is to secure financial stability for his family before he dies. And he achieves that want relatively early in the series. He gets the money.
But the narrative continues because what he actually needs is to confront his own suppressed ego.
He needs to feel powerful, dangerous, and respected. By giving him what he wanted, the writers stripped away his excuses and forced him to confront his true, destructive nature.
The fulfillment of the want is actually the catalyst for the tragedy.
Precisely.
Now, Hunt provides a much less destructive but equally brilliant example of this from her own work. She wrote a children's picture book called A Gift for Grandpa.
And it perfectly encapsulates this architecture without needing meth empires.
Exactly. So there's a little boy. His stated want is very clear. He wants to buy his grandpa a silver watch chain for his birthday.
But he only has $1
Right. Meanwhile, the text establishes what grandpa actually needs. Grandpa's farm is struggling and he desperately needs a new horse.
That is a significant gap between a $1 budget and the macroeconomic realities of purchasing livestock.
It's just a slight gap, yeah. So the boy embarks on a series of bartering trades. He takes his dollar and buys some eggs.
Okay.
He trades the eggs for some pigs, the pigs for some quilts. He works his way up the ladder until, astonishingly, he manages to barter for a horse.
Okay, so the universe, or the plot, has provided exactly what the grandpa needs. The farm is saved.
But it has entirely subverted what the boy wanted. The boy wanted to give a watch chain.
Right. You can just imagine the boy staring at this massive Clydesdale thinking, this is great for the plowing, but how do I attach a pocket watch to it?
Exactly. The tension is resolved on a macro level, but completely unresolved on a personal level. But Hunt introduces an elegant compromise.
How does she resolve it?
The boy takes the horse, cuts a portion of its tail hair, and with his grandma's help, meticulously braids it into a beautiful, sturdy watch chain.
Oh, that is a phenomenal narrative loop.
Isn't it? Through his own ingenuity and effort, the boy utilizes the provision of need to fill the underlying emotional truth of his want.
The grandpa gets his horse, and he gets a watch chain made from that very horse. It satisfies the reader deeply because the resolution was earned, not just handed out.
Earning the resolution brings us to the darker side of Hunt's rules. Rule 7. Let your characters suffer longer than you want. Don't take pity on them.
This is where authors have to be a little sadistic.
And I have to be honest, as a reader, when a character I love is trapped or heartbroken or in physical danger, my instinct is to scream for the author to save them. Why on earth should the writer prolong the agony?
Because premature rescue is the assassin of tension. As Hunt notes, pressure reveals character.
That's true in real life, too.
Exactly. Think about how we evaluate people in the real world. We don't truly know who a person is when everything is going well.
Right, everyone is nice on a sunny day.
We find out who they are when the project is failing, the budget is gone, and the deadline is tomorrow. The same is true for a protagonist.
If the cavalry arrives the minute the hero gets a little dirt on their face, we never get to see what they're actually made of. We never see them reach their breaking point.
And Hunt utilizes two specific structural tools to ensure that breaking point is reached. The first is Rule 14, confinement. You must put your character in a room and remove the exit.
She gives some great examples in the source material. A broken elevator, a hospital room, a courtroom.
Or the most terrifying psychological pressure cooker known to humanity, a holiday family dinner.
The inescapable family dinner. It's so true. The psychological principle behind confinement is that human beings are naturally conflict averse.
Very much so. If there's an easy exit, a door to walk out of, a subject they can change, a phone they can look at, they will take it.
And if they can escape the discomfort, the conflict fizzles out. Confinement forces confrontation. They cannot physically or socially leave the space, so they must deal with the threat in front of them.
And once they are locked in that room, you deploy Rule 9. Give your protagonist an impossible choice.
Not a choice between a good option and a bad option, because that's way too easy.
Right, a choice between two equally terrible options or two mutually exclusive good options.
The classic dilemma, like a mother must choose which of her children to save.
Or a whistleblower must choose between exposing a corrupt company, destroying their family's financial security, or staying silent and living with immense guilt.
Why are these choices so vital to a story?
Because an impossible choice forces a character to establish a hierarchy of values. When a character is forced to sacrifice something they love to save something else they love, they prove to the reader what matters most to them.
It strips away all their dialogue and their posturing. Action is character.
In that moment of agonizing decision, the reader bonds with the protagonist on a profound emotional level.
Okay, so we are torturing our characters. We have them locked in a room, stripped of their false beliefs, forced to make impossible choices, and we're actively refusing to rescue them.
It sounds incredibly intense.
It does. But how does a writer manage the delivery of this intensity? If you run the engine at 10,000 RPMs constantly, the reader will just get exhausted and close the book.
Which brings us to Hunt's rules regarding pacing and trusting the reader's intelligence.
Pacing is where amateur writers usually stumble, isn't it?
Often, yes. They believe that more detail always equals a richer experience. But Hunt advocates for severe narrative efficiency.
I was struck by the ruthless pragmatism of Rule 1 and Rule 12. Rule 1, start as late as possible, end as early as possible. And Rule 12, cut your first chapter.
Imagine spending 3 weeks crafting an exquisite, atmospheric prologue detailing the complex geopolitical history of a fictional kingdom.
The prose is lush. The world building is dense.
And Hunt's advice is to highlight it all and hit the delete key.
It is heartbreaking, but her reasoning is completely sound. She points out that the first chapter is usually just the author clearing their throat.
It is the writer trying to figure out the setting and the backstory on the page. It's the writer warming up.
But the reader doesn't need to see the warm-up.
Exactly. If you start the story on the day before the inciting incident, you are forcing the reader to endure mundane normality.
But if you drop the reader directly into the middle of a bank robbery, the alarms are blaring, the hostages are screaming, the protagonist is bleeding, you immediately hook their survival instincts.
They have to keep reading to orient themselves. You start at the latest possible moment of consequence, and you cut the scene the exact second the emotional shift occurs.
Do not linger to describe them walking to their car. Cut and move.
And this speed, this efficiency, requires a massive amount of trust in the reader. Which brings us to Rule 8, abbreviated as RUE. Resist the urge to explain.
This is the psychological mechanism behind the old cliche, show, don't tell, right?
Yes, show don't tell is often taught as a stylistic preference, but Hunt frames it as a tool for cognitive engagement.
Explain the difference there. What happens in the brain when a writer explains versus when they show?
Let's say a writer types the sentence, Sarah was terrified of rejection, so she was acting very nervous. In that scenario, the writer has done 100% of the cognitive labor. The writer has analyzed Sarah's psychology, determined her emotional state, and handed the conclusion to the reader on a silver platter.
The reader is entirely passive. They simply consume the data.
Right. But if the writer resists that urge,
Then what happens?
then the writer types.
Yeah.
Sarah sat at the cafe table. She picked up a napkin, folded it into a perfect square, unfolded it, and folded it again. When the bell above the door chimed, she flinched, knocking over her water glass, but didn't look up.
Oh, wow. Now the writer has provided zero conclusions.
They have only provided behavioral data, so the reader's brain is forced to process that data. The reader has to ask, why is she obsessing over the napkin? Why did she flinch? Oh, she is terrified.
The reader has to play detective, and when the reader arrives at the conclusion themselves, they feel ownership of the insight.
The emotional resonance is 10 times stronger because they had to work for it.
Yeah.
They are actively participating in the scene.
That's brilliant. But as we discussed earlier, you cannot maintain a relentless pace of high-stakes detective work forever. You must vary the frequency.
Which is why Rule 17 is so vital. Write the quiet scene.
You know, in modern entertainment, there is a terrible tendency to equate spectacle with excitement. We think if we just add another car chase, another explosion, another screaming match, the audience will stay hooked.
But Hunt argues that noise eventually just becomes static. If you are standing next to a jet engine, you eventually go deaf to the roar.
A narrative needs valleys, so the peaks have scale.
Exactly. A quiet scene like a restrained conversation over a shared meal, or a character quietly repairing a broken tool, or a small, unexpected act of mercy, it allows the reader to process the trauma the characters have just endured.
It allows the emotional reality of those impossible choices to settle. In many ways, the quiet scenes are where the actual story happens. The loud scenes are just the catalysts. So we have dismantled the mechanics. We know how to catch the wild ideas, how to bypass perfectionism, how to trap our flawed characters, and how to pace their suffering.
But a perfectly engineered machine is completely useless if it doesn't have a destination.
Right. A beautiful car with a flawless engine still needs a driver who knows where they are actually going.
This transitions us out of the mechanics and into the soul of the work. Section 3, the author's why.
We are talking about a mission statement. And this portion of the Write Well newsletter is fascinating because Hunt gets very transparent about her own personal framework for meaning.
She does.
Now, before we dive into her specific framework, I want to clarify something for you, the listener. Hunt's personal mission statement happens to be rooted in her Christian faith. But we are looking at this objectively as a masterclass in thematic architecture.
Right. Whether your worldview is rooted in Stoicism, secular humanism, environmentalism, or nihilism, the structural challenge is identical.
How do you embed your deep philosophical beliefs into an entertaining piece of genre fiction without turning it into a preachy, boring lecture?
Because nobody wants to read a sermon disguised as a thriller. They will feel completely manipulated.
Exactly. So Hunt discusses an interview she did early in her career where she was asked a highly defining question. Are you a Christian writer or a writer who happens to be Christian?
And she recognized the trap in the question immediately.
The interviewer was essentially asking, are you going to write safe, sanitized books exclusively for an insular religious subculture, or are you going to write for the broader secular world?
She chose to write for the broader world. She states that she views her thrillers as parables at their core.
And if we look at the historical and psychological function of a parable, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Why did ancient teachers use parables instead of just handing out lists of rules?
Because direct moral instruction triggers the human ego's defensive walls.
Right. If I tell you how you should live, you will instinctively argue with me.
But if I tell you a story about a farmer, your defenses drop. The story sneaks past the ego, and the truth is planted before you even realize you are being taught.
To execute this modern parable structure, Hunt developed what she calls the three-level approach. She likens it to an onion.
It is a brilliant strategy for layering meaning so that readers with entirely different worldviews can read the exact same book and walk away satisfied, but with different takeaways.
Let's dissect the onion. The outermost layer is level 1.
Hunt uses her novel The Note as the prime example of a level 1 book. On the surface, the outer layer, this is a purely secular commercial thriller.
The plot mechanics are straightforward. A newspaper reporter, whose career is on the rocks, is trying to track down a mysterious note that washed up on a beach after a tragic commercial plane crash.
If you are a secular reader looking for a gripping airport thriller, you can pick up the note, engage with the mystery, follow the reporter's investigation, enjoy the suspense, and close the book perfectly satisfied.
The narrative functions flawlessly, purely as entertainment. The plot holds up without any philosophical crutches.
But if you are a reader who is looking for deeper thematic resonance, you can peel back that outer layer.
Because Hunt designed the core architecture of the story as a massive metaphor.
The message in a bottle from a doomed flight is a metaphor for God writing a note to humanity and the desperate lengths required to ensure the message is delivered.
The spiritual insight is woven entirely into the subtext. It is there if you want to find it, but it never halts the plot to announce itself.
It is the ultimate manifestation of show, don't tell, applied to philosophy.
She then defines level 2 books, like her novel A Most Peculiar Providence, where the thematic elements are a bit closer to the surface. Characters might be seen grappling with faith openly, but the narrative remains accessible to a general audience.
And finally, level 3 books are deep, explicit thematic explorations written specifically for her faith community, dealing with complex theological nuances.
The brilliance here is the intentionality. She is never confused about which layer of the onion she is constructing.
But what I found equally refreshing, and honestly almost entirely countercultural in the arts community, is her defense of writers who do not have a grand philosophical mission statement at all.
Yes. There is a pervasive romanticism in creative fields that demands every piece of art be a profound bleeding of the soul.
If you aren't suffering for a deeper truth, you aren't a real artist.
We want to believe our favorite authors are secluded in cabins, agonizing over the human condition. But Hunt pushes back hard on that.
She notes that many of her highly successful peers treat writing simply as a job. They write corporate speeches, freelance articles, or ghostwrite biographies to pay their mortgage.
And she uses this fantastic, deeply pragmatic analogy to defend them, the dentist analogy.
Oh, it perfectly neutralizes the pretension of the tortured artist.
She says, look at a dentist. A dentist goes to school, learns a highly technical, difficult trade, and then opens a practice. A dentist doesn't view every root canal as a profound spiritual ministry.
Right. A dentist doesn't only agree to work on Christian teeth or secular teeth.
They utilize their learned craft to serve whatever client walks through the door to the absolute best of their ability.
It is a trade. It is a service. Hunt admits that if a client paid her a fair rate to write a comprehensive article about dingbats, whatever those are, she would not suffer an existential crisis.
She would sit down, research dingbats, apply her technical mastery of prose and pacing, and deliver the best article on dingbats the world has ever seen.
So this is where we have to pause and look at you, the listener, because this applies whether you are writing code, designing architectural blueprints, or managing a logistics team.
What is your actual mission statement? Are you doing the work to express a deep personal worldview?
Are you doing it to teach and educate? Or are you doing it simply because you possess a valuable skill that pays for the life you want to live outside of work?
All of those motivations are entirely valid, but as Hunt's framework proves, identifying why you are doing the work dictates how you approach it.
Exactly. If your mission is purely financial, you don't need to spend 3 weeks agonizing over the thematic subtext of a marketing email. Knowing your mission saves you from misplaced effort.
Okay, so you have braved the blank page. You have captured the rusty water. You have subjected your flawed characters to impossible choices in confined spaces.
You have woven your deep philosophical mission statement seamlessly into the subtext. You have a finished manuscript.
And none of it matters if the book stays rotting on your hard drive.
Right. You have to get someone to actually open the thing.
And the psychology of making a reader stop, look at a cover, and decide to invest 10 hours of their life into your thoughts relies almost entirely on 3 or 4 words.
We are talking about the agonizing, hair-pulling art of titling your work.
Hunt calls the title the first handshake. It is the initial point of contact between your mind and the reader's mind.
And her central thesis for titling revolves around her newsletter's word of the week, resonance.
A title must resonate. It must possess a quality that causes it to echo in the mind long after it is heard.
And to prove how incredibly fragile that resonance is, Hunt drops a piece of literary trivia that completely recontextualized American literature for me.
We all know Margaret Mitchell's absolute masterpiece, Gone with the Wind. It is arguably one of the most iconic, evocative titles ever conceived.
It conjures images of sweeping tragedy, lost eras, and profound grief before you even open page 1. It is a masterclass in atmospheric titling.
But the trivia is that Mitchell originally intended to title the book Tomorrow is Another Day.
And the fiery, unforgettable, culturally iconic protagonist, Scarlett O'Hara. Her original name was Pansy.
Pansy O'Hara in Tomorrow is Another Day.
It is physically painful to say out loud.
It fundamentally alters the legacy of the book. Gone with the Wind promises an epic historical tragedy. Tomorrow is Another Day sounds like a cheap self-help paperback you buy at an airport pharmacy to cheer yourself up after a bad breakup.
It perfectly illustrates how a title frames the reader's psychological expectation. If the reader expects a breezy self-help book and is suddenly confronted with the burning of Atlanta, the cognitive dissonance will cause them to reject the work entirely.
But Hunt also provides a sobering reality check about the publishing industry. Finding the perfect title doesn't guarantee you actually get to use it.
Right, there is a massive divide between indie publishing and traditional publishing here.
If you are an indie author, you are the absolute dictator of your project. You control the cover, the formatting, and the title.
But if you sign with a traditional publishing house, you surrender a massive amount of control to committees.
Because traditional publishers are not just evaluating artistic resonance, they are evaluating market algorithms, SEO optimization, and retail trends.
They have sales teams and marketing departments who will often completely overrule the author's instincts.
Hunt shares a painful, personal example of this. She wrote a book aimed at parents navigating the difficult middle school years. She gave it a clean, highly resonant, perfectly descriptive title, Surviving the Tweenage Years.
It tells you exactly what the book is and who it is for.
But the marketing committee got a hold of it, they ran it through their process and forced a change. The final published title was Too Old to Ride, Too Young to Drive.
Which is an absolute disaster of a title.
It's awful.
It is clunky, it lacks any emotional punch, and ironically, it is harder to remember. Hun herself admits she occasionally struggles to recall the exact phrasing of her own book's title because it is so unnatural.
So assuming you haven't been overruled by a committee, how do you intentionally engineer a resonant title?
The most crucial distinction Hunt makes is that titling nonfiction and titling fiction require diametrically opposed psychological strategies.
It comes down to understanding the reader's core motivation. A person browsing the nonfiction aisle has a specific problem they want solved.
They want to be more productive, they want to lose weight, they want to understand history. Therefore, the governing law of a nonfiction title is clarity.
The title must immediately answer the reader's subconscious question. What will this book do for me?
Hunt provides a foolproof formula for this. Hook plus explanation.
Let's look at James Clear's massive bestseller, Atomic Habits. The hook is Atomic Habits. It is punchy, it creates a visual, it's memorable.
But the hook alone doesn't promise a solution. That is why the subtitle, the explanation, does the heavy lifting. An easy and proven way to build good habits and break bad ones.
Boom. Absolute, undeniable clarity. You know exactly what you are buying.
Clarity builds trust. But fiction operates on an entirely different neurological pathway.
A fiction reader is not looking for a solution. They are looking for an escape, an experience, or an emotional journey.
Therefore, fiction titles are not about clarity. They are about curiosity. A fiction title should never explain the plot. It should raise a provocative question.
You don't title a fantasy epic. A boy discovers he's a wizard and goes to a hidden school to fight a dark lord. You title it Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone.
Hunt is incredibly generous here and provides 11 different frameworks for generating curiosity-driven titles.
Let's analyze a few of the most effective ones because they rely heavily on linguistic friction.
The first is startling word combinations. The brain is a pattern recognition machine. When it sees two words that belong together, it just ignores them.
But when it sees two words that violently clash, it halts. Like Alice Sebold's The Lovely Bones.
The word lovely implies beauty, warmth, and life. The word bones implies death, decay, and finality.
Forcing those two concepts to share a phrase creates immediate psychological tension. You have to read the book to resolve the paradox.
Another framework is parodying a familiar phrase. John Green's The Fault in Our Stars takes a famous line from Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, "The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves," and truncates it.
It borrows the cultural gravity of the original quote, but twists the meaning, leaving the reader curious about the alteration.
Then you have pairing an emotional word with a concrete word. Sue Monk Kidd's The Secret Life of Bees.
Secret Life provides the emotional intrigue and mystery, while Bees grounds the title in a very specific, earthy, tangible image. It prevents the title from feeling too ethereal or pretentious.
But knowing the frameworks is the easy part. Executing them is where writers hit the wall. And to break through that wall, Hunt demands that writers perform the 25 title exercise.
I want to challenge you, the listener, to do this. The next time you have to name anything, a massive corporate initiative, a new software product, or a novel, do not brainstorm 5 ideas. Do not brainstorm 10.
Force yourself to write a numbered list of exactly 25 titles.
It sounds excessive, but there is a brutal neurological necessity to that specific number.
The brain is lazy. When you start brainstorming, the first 10 titles you generate will be the sludge in the pipes.
The rusty water. They will be cliches. They will be the obvious, uninspired concepts floating at the surface of your consciousness.
Let's actually demonstrate this. Let's say we are writing a thriller about a mundane corporate accountant who discovers that a specific cell in his Excel spreadsheet, cell D4, is actually a digital portal to hell.
Okay, good premise. Let's start brainstorming titles.
Title 1, The Devil's Spreadsheet. Title 2, Hell in a Cell. Title 3, Accounting for Demons.
These are terrible. They are exactly what you expect. They are level 1 sludge.
Now you keep going. By the time you hit title 11, the obvious answers are gone. Titles 11 through 14 are going to be agonizing.
You will stare at the paper. You will feel genuine frustration. You'll start writing literal descriptions just to fill the page, like the portal in cell D4.
But that agony is the feeling of the brain being forced out of its habitual pathways. It is searching for lateral connections.
And the magic happens somewhere around title 18 or title 20. The brain, desperate for a solution, starts colliding unexpected concepts. It reaches for deeper metaphors.
It stops focusing on the spreadsheet and starts focusing on the stakes. So Title 20 becomes The Ledger of the Damned. Title 22 becomes A Balance of Souls.
Title 25 becomes red ink.
Red ink. That is the winner. It's a double entendre. It applies perfectly to accounting, indicating a financial loss, but in the context of the thriller, it implies blood and consequence.
You would never reach red ink on the first try. You have to exhaust the cliches to find the resonance.
And Hunt knows that we now have a technological shortcut to help with the heavy lifting. If you are truly trapped in the agony of numbers 11 through 14, you can utilize an AI language model.
You can feed it your plot summary, your themes, and your protagonist's flaws, and command it to generate 100 titles.
Now, 95 of those titles will be absolute generic garbage. But you aren't looking for the AI to do the work for you. You are looking for a spark.
Seeing 100 bad ideas spread out like a digital sticky note wall might highlight one weird juxtaposition of words that triggers your own brain to find the perfect phrase.
So you have the manuscript, you have the resonant title. Now we arrive at the final, often insurmountable hurdle, Section 5, the gatekeepers.
You have to package this massive, complex piece of art into a tiny, persuasive pitch. We are talking about writing back cover copy and query letters.
This transition is where so many brilliant writers fail. Because the skill set required to write a sweeping 90,000-word emotional epic is fundamentally different from the skill set required to write a 200-word marketing pitch.
You are switching from being a novelist to being a copywriter.
Let's look at the back cover copy, or BCC. If you are self-publishing, the BCC is your primary and often only marketing tool.
It is the text on the Amazon product page. It is what determines if a browser clicks buy.
And Hunt provides a brutally efficient 4-step psychological sequence for constructing it. Step 1, protagonist and setting. Step 2, complication. Step 3, the stakes. Step 4, the promise.
Let's break down why that specific sequence works, using the example Hunt provides. She was outlining a thriller set in the Florida Everglades.
Step 1. Protagonist and setting. The text reads, Catherine Armstrong, a billionaire's wife, seeks a quiet weekend retreat with her children at their isolated glass mansion in the Florida Everglades.
Why start there? Because the human brain needs grounding before it can process conflict. We need to know who we are worried about and where they are.
And notice the efficiency. Billionaire's wife establishes high status and massive resources. Isolated glass mansion establishes a false sense of security but physical vulnerability.
Then we hit step 2, the complication. A massive storm knocks out the power, floods the mainland road, and an apex predator, a massive Nile crocodile, begins circling the rising waters around the house.
The complication must immediately destabilize the setting. The storm removes the deus ex machina of a helicopter rescue. The power outage removes communication.
And the crocodile introduces a primal physical threat that Catherine's billions of dollars cannot solve. The brain craves this novelty.
Step 3. The stakes. With her children's lives in immediate danger, Catherine must confront her own paralyzing fears and outsmart a prehistoric killer before the water breaches the doors.
This forces the protagonist into Hunt's impossible choice scenario.
And finally, step 4. The promise. A tense, claustrophobic survival thriller that proves the most dangerous things in the swamp are a mother's protective instincts.
This tells the reader exactly what emotional experience they are buying. But the absolute golden rule of BCC, which Hunt hammers home, is that every single unnecessary adjective must be purged.
You cannot waste word count describing the beautiful hues of the Everglades sunset. The BCC is a precision instrument designed solely to hook the limbic system.
The BCC is hard, but it is nothing compared to the final boss of traditional publishing, the query letter.
If you want an agent, you have to write a query letter. It is an email begging an industry professional to read your manuscript.
And Hunt brings in guest advice from literary agent Jessica Berg, who delivers an absolute epiphany about why 99% of query letters are rejected instantly.
This might be the most valuable piece of advice in the entire newsletter. Berg states that the fatal mistake writers make is utilizing the query letter to explain what happens in the book.
They summarize the plot mechanics, they explain the magic system, they outline the historical timeline, they focus entirely on the events.
Because they spent 3 years writing the events, they are proud of the plot.
Of course they are. But the agent doesn't care about the events yet.
Berg says writers must stop explaining what happens and start explaining what the book is. They need to articulate the emotional oxygen the book provides to the reader.
Explaining what it is versus what happens. Let's use the example Berg provides, which is the movie Forrest Gump.
If you sit down to write a query letter for Forrest Gump and you focus on what happens, the plot, your pitch, sounds like this.
This is a story about a boy with leg braces. He runs fast to escape bullies. He goes to college to play football. Then he goes to Vietnam and gets shot. Then he plays ping pong. Then he buys a shrimp boat. Then he runs across America.
If you read that pitch, it sounds exhausting. It sounds like a disjointed, chaotic series of random historical events with no connective tissue.
It sounds incredibly boring. It provides zero emotional hook.
But if you write the query letter based on what the story is, the emotional core, it sounds entirely different.
You write, this is a story about a pure, innocent heart navigating the chaos of modern American history. He overcomes tragedy, rises above his circumstances, and profoundly impacts everyone he meets. It is aimed at readers who believe love can transcend hardship and who delight in life's unexpected surprises.
The difference is staggering. The first pitch is a dry Wikipedia summary. The second pitch is a promise of an emotional experience. It identifies the target audience immediately.
And you have to empathize with the gatekeeper here. Berg points out that literary agents receive dozens, sometimes hundreds of these emails every single day.
They suffer from severe decision fatigue. They do not have the cognitive bandwidth to parse a dense, multi-paragraph synopsis of your intergalactic political factions.
They want to know, in 10 seconds, who this book is for and how it will make them feel.
And if you are listening right now thinking, well, I'm an accountant, I'm never going to write a query letter to a literary agent, I want you to replace the phrase query letter with project proposal.
Think about the last time you pitched a massive new initiative to your boss or your board of directors. Did you exhaust them with a 50-slide PowerPoint detailing the granular day-to-day mechanics of how you were going to execute the project?
Or did you sell them on the vision of what the project is? Did you explain the emotional and financial relief it would provide to the company?
The psychology of persuasion is identical. You have to sell the destination before you explain the engine.
That is a perfect application of the principle. And speaking of applying these principles in the real world, Hunt concludes her advice for beginners with a heavy dose of pragmatism.
She warns aspiring authors not to start their career by attempting to scale Mount Everest. Do not let your very first creative endeavor be a 120,000-word epic fantasy novel.
Start small. Start by writing 800-word articles. Write short stories. And most importantly, submit those small pieces to publications where an editor has the power to reject you.
Hunt draws a massive distinction between hiring a freelance editor to polish your self-published novel and submitting an article to a traditional editor.
When you hire an editor, you are the boss. You can ignore their advice. But when you submit to a magazine or an anthology, the editor is the gatekeeper. They have the power to kill your project entirely.
The stakes are real.
Exactly. When rejection is on the table, you learn professional discipline rapidly. You learn how to swallow your pride, how to decipher editorial feedback, how to revise efficiently, and how to meet strict deadlines.
You learn that your words are not sacred texts. They are materials meant to be molded.
You learn to be a professional communicator. And a fundamental part of being a professional is mastering the basic tools of the trade.
Hunt includes a few grammar and vocabulary detours in the newsletter because nothing destroys a brilliant query letter faster than a glaring grammatical error. It shatters the illusion of competence.
It is the equivalent of showing up to pitch a multi-million-dollar startup to venture capitalists while wearing a tuxedo paired with muddy sneakers.
The ideas might be brilliant, but the presentation signals a lack of attention to detail.
So let's clear up a classic pitfall she mentions. The difference between assure, insure, and insure.
They sound identical, but using them wrong makes you look deeply unprofessional. Think of it this way. I am assuring you, the listener, that Hunt's writing advice works. I am giving you verbal confidence.
By doing this deep dive, we are ensuring you have the necessary tools to write a great book. We are taking action to make certain it happens.
And you do all this so you don't have to insure yourself against bankruptcy if the book fails. Insure, with an I, is strictly for financial risk policies.
It is a clean, memorable distinction. She also throws in a couple of fantastic vocabulary warnings to round out the professional mindset.
Yes, she warns against being disputatious, which is a wonderfully formal word that means being overly fond of heated arguments.
If an editor sends you feedback telling you that your pacing is slow, do not write back a disputatious email explaining why they are too stupid to understand your genius. You will never work with them again.
And she warns against the unintentional comedy of the malapropism.
Oh, malapropisms are the best. It's when you confidently use a word that sounds similar to the word you actually mean, but the meaning is absurdly wrong.
Like trying to compliment a smart kid in your query letter by calling them a progeny of learning instead of a prodigy of learning.
Or saying your thriller will keep readers on the edge of their seats.
Hmm.
You do not want the literary agent forwarding your email to the entire office because your malapropism made them laugh out loud.
You want your pitch remembered for its profound emotional resonance, not its accidental comedy.
So let's step back and look at the massive journey we've taken through Angela Hunt's mind today.
We started by looking at Riley Walls's wall of chaotic sticky notes, learning the vital neurological importance of capturing the rusty water, the bad, trivial, and silly ideas, just to keep the generic idea muscle functioning.
We learned how Andy Weir collided those trivial ideas to build universes.
We learned to abandon the envy trap of comparing ourselves to Michael Bay, and we embraced the profound liberation of rule number 10, finishing badly. We accepted that the first draft is just sand in a sandbox.
We took that sand and ran it through the crucible of Hunt's crazy rules. We realized our protagonists must start with a deeply flawed view of the world.
We learned to give them what they think they want, only to expose what they actually need. We locked them in rooms, stripped away the easy exits, and tortured them with impossible choices to force them to reveal their true values.
We examined the pacing required to sustain that tension, trusting the reader's intelligence by showing the nervous folding of a napkin rather than explaining the fear, and allowing the narrative to breathe in the quiet scenes.
We grounded all of those mechanics in the author's why, exploring how to layer a worldview into a narrative using the parable onion strategy, while simultaneously respecting the sheer blue-collar professionalism of the dentist analogy.
And finally, we learned how to package the art. We learned how to find resonance in a title, by surviving the agony of the 25 title exercise, and we learned how to pitch the emotional oxygen of the story to the gatekeepers, rather than just reciting the mechanical events of the plot.
It is a staggering amount of architectural knowledge packed into the Write Well newsletter. It truly is a masterclass in the life cycle of human communication.
But as we wrap up, I want to pull all these concepts out of the realm of publishing, out of the realm of fiction, and drop them squarely into the reality of everyday life.
Because these rules of narrative tension, they're not just tricks for selling books. They are profound observations about how human beings operate.
They are blueprints of the human condition. And I want to leave the listener with a thought experiment based on Hunt's foundational rules for character growth.
Okay, let's hear it.
Hunt established that a compelling protagonist cannot begin the story perfectly right. They must start with a false belief, a flawed interpretation of reality that is holding them back.
Furthermore, she notes that the most powerful plots do not rely on random external disasters.
The strongest plots happen when the protagonist's own choices, driven by their false belief, are the actual cause of their crisis. They are not merely victims of circumstance, they are the architects of their own trouble.
And growth only occurs when they are pushed into a corner and forced to make an impossible choice that shatters that false belief.
That is the formula for transformation. So, to you, the listener, if your life right now, at this exact moment, is a novel, what is the false belief you're clinging to?
What is the flawed interpretation of your career, your relationships, or your own worth that feels completely justified to you, but is actually the exact thing preventing your growth?
And perhaps more importantly, look at the conflicts you are facing today. What impossible choice is the author of your story waiting for you to make? What comfortable exit is being blocked so that your real transformation can finally begin?
That is an incredible lens to view our own struggles through. We love a good impossible choice. Listen, grab a massive stack of sticky notes, turn the rusty faucet on, let the bad ideas flow, and just start writing your way out of the room. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into Angela Hunt's masterclass. We will catch you next time.